All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Ideologies in the Servicescape, the retail industry, customer service, and the academic library, brought to you by the ACRL Access Services Interest Group. I am Tori Liegi, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Instructional Services Librarian and Coordinator of Access Services at Lycoming College, and the co-convener for this interest group. My co-convener is Lorelei Sterling, and I'll briefly let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Lorelei Sterling. My pronouns are she, her. I am the head of access services at the Consortium Library at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. Thank you, Tori.
Thanks, Lorelei. So Lorelei will be moderating our chat today and keeping track of our questions for our presenters so they can answer them at the end. Before I go ahead and introduce our presenters, I'd like to go over just a couple logistics. So this presentation will run for an hour, including time for questions at the end. If you have a question during the presentation, please enter it in the chat and we will collect them so the presenters can answer them at the end. And please make sure that you send your questions to everyone in the chat so we can try to reduce any duplication of questions. You may have to select everyone in the Zoom chat rather than sending it only to presenters and co-hosts. And then at the end, we'll also post a link to a very brief evaluation in the chat box so that we can collect your feedback on this session for today. So with those announcements out of the way, I'm happy to start today's presentation by introducing our wonderful presenters who are also welcome to more fully introduce themselves if they would like to. So today we have Eleanor Cleveland speaking. She's the Access Services Coordinator for the Robert Manning Strozer Library at Florida State University. She's worked at FSU Library since 2015 and earned her Master's of Science in Information from FSU's iSchool in 2022. James Waters is the Scholar Support Specialist for the Social Sciences, Arts, and Humanities Department at Strozer Library. He earned his Master's of Science in Information from FSU's iSchool in 2019. And Jeff Hipsher is the Access Services Librarian and Head of Access Services and Delivery for FSU Libraries. He has an MFA in Creative Writing from FSU's English Department and a Master of Science of Information from FSU's iSchool. So without further delay, I'll hand it over to our panelists and thank you very much.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our session. Before we get started, we would like to thank the Access Services Interest Group for hosting this virtual forum, and thank you to co-conveners Tori and Lorelei for inviting us to present. As y'all just heard, I'm Eleanor Cleveland, and I'm the Access Services Coordinator for Strozer Library at Florida State. I've been with FSU Library since 2015 and in this role since 2021, and got my Master's of Science in Information from the iSchool in 2022.
Hi, everyone. I'm James Waters, and as you heard, I'm the Scholar Support Specialist for Social Sciences, Arts, and Humanities Department at Strozer Library, and I've worked for FSU Libraries for over 14 years in a variety of roles and departments.
And I'm Jeff Hipsher, Access Services Librarian, Head of Access Services and Delivery at FSU Libraries. But before the libraries, I held management and supervisory positions at Walgreens, Cost Plus World Market, Half Price Books, Follett Higher Education Group, and others. And in 2016, I helped develop, design, and launch Midtown Reader, an independent bookstore here in Tallahassee, serving as its first general manager. What's presented here today represents a few years of research, thinking, scribbling, and casual conversations between myself, James, and Eleanor. The project in total aims to be an investigation of the relationship between the retail service industry and the work of access services departments in the academic library. But today's presentation will narrow in scope, focusing primarily on one aspect: the ideology, rhetoric, and performance of customer service. The Department of Access Services and Delivery at FSU Libraries oversees our complex suite of frontline services, our campus-wide Library Express delivery, and access to and stewardship of our general collection, which across 3 main library branches totals around 2.9 million monographs. 15 full-time staff and 65 part-time staff work in 3 distinct shifts across 3 libraries, operating 4 distinct service points to keep services operational and available to scholars 7 days a week.
And so as grad students working in an access services department in a large academic library, we found it curious how rarely this work surfaced in our course syllabi and began a collaborative research project investigating how access services librarians define their institutional roles and gain their professional training. And when we started our research, we came across a survey conducted in 2014 titled "Where Do They Come From and How Are They Trained?", in which 150 access services librarians, each with MLIS degrees from accredited programs, responded to questions about their professional education, technical training, and perspectives on access services librarianship. 97% agree that directly assisting patrons with informational, directional, and reference questions is a core job function, and 71% rated their familiarity with customer service as excellent at the time of their appointment as access services librarian. However, 63% said this customer service experience was gained on the job in the library. 21% gained their customer service experience in other industries before their careers in librarianship. Only 5% reported customer service experience gained in library school. Additionally, the ACRL framework for access services librarianship lists customer service as a core competency. As frontline service providers for the library, access services must develop proactive customer service internally and externally. Access services managers must also be skilled with conflict resolution as part of appeal or complaint processes. Furthermore, none of the U.S. News and World Report top 10 MLIS programs currently offer courses focused specifically on access services. So, if access services requires a high level of customer service expertise, which includes de-escalation techniques, access services staff receive that training either on the job or from previous work experience in the service industry. And access services librarians who run these departments and train these staff members do not study or receive training on customer service while earning their library science degrees. Then it would seem that academic libraries rely on the customer service experience gained by staff while working in other service industry jobs to shape their own customer service philosophies and training programs. And we can see this reflected in much of the scholarship concerning access services. Entering the keywords retail, customer service, or service industry into the library literature and information science full text database yields many articles and books discussing the work of public services staff, several of which are listed here. And the first article we want to highlight is Why We Borrow, Using Retail Strategies in Public Libraries. This article describes a partnership between the Chicago Metropolitan Library System and EnviroCell Incorporated, a retail design consulting firm that specializes in the impact of environmental psychology on customers in retail spaces and designs them accordingly. The article details EnviroCell's use of strategically placed surveillance cameras and mapping software to monitor and analyze the browsing habits and movement patterns of library patrons. The actual study, produced in 2008 and entitled Best Practices for the Customer-Focused Library, is available online and contains a list of key findings, which include people already in the library are a primary target for items and services. The fact that a large percentage visited alone indicates an openness to product placement and service pitches. The short length of time indicates the need for a simple, easily transmitted message. And in retail, alone visitors are either mission-oriented or are more open to messages than couples. Break through the force field of personal space to deliver the message. They also recommended libraries institute a secret shopper program to assess the customer service skills of staff and the front-facing and in-capping of library stacks to make materials more attractive and easier to browse. Additionally, the research methods section boasts EnviroCell generated over 750 hours of recorded video for behavioral analysis, and we were unable to determine if library patrons were aware they were being recorded. First published in 2011, this book, Listening to the Customer, appears again and again in literature reviews pertaining to customer service in the library. In it, the authors argue that referring to library users as customers forces information professionals to consider the cost paid by scholars as they access library materials and services, that cost being their time, distance traveled, and tuition. In this way, we should think of their visit to the library as a purchase decision and scholars as customers of the academic institution. The book argues for all the typical retail tactics for improving customer service, secret shopping, data analytics, and the always vague more training. Finally, in this article, Define and Design the Bookstore Model of Customer Service, It opens with a long preamble which couches the article in a series of caveats, asterisks, and admittances about the perils of incorporating retail customer service strategies in the library. But ultimately, the two former bookstore workers turned librarians suggest that library customer service practitioners adopt templates for experience management, like those used by Apple and Disney. This would be to help make library workers more approachable and cool, like booksellers, who, in their opinion, are more beloved by the average consumer than information professionals. When detailing their approach, they describe it as such. The central conceit of experience management is the proactive and personalized promotion of additional services. In the bookstore, we called this upselling. The authors also note that whereas in their retail jobs, they received extensive regular customer service training, the same was not true for their library careers, describing their experience as being thrown into the deep end of public services. What we noticed in most, if not all, of the literature reviewed is how frequently the cultural and ideological significance of the American retail space was either hand-waved or wholly overlooked by the information professionals looking to borrow its tips and tricks, as though they can be teased out and isolated from the industry in which they were forged, or the daily acts of consumption through which they are experienced. Experiences which are the product of the tireless data mining, research, and experimentation known in the industry as retail design theory and implemented by firms like Envirocell Incorporated. This work creates a space known in the retail industry as Servicescape, a complex system of environmental conditions, symbols, and stimuli which communicate service quality attributes, establishing customer expectations and creating the service experience. As defined in the industry textbook Retail Design Theoretical Perspectives, the Servicescape is expertly designed to have an impact on brand equity as a material and symbolic environment that consumers build with marketplace products, images, and messages that they invest with local meaning and whose totemic significance largely shapes the adoption consumers make to the modern world.
And that space is inherently hostile towards both consumers and workers alike. As described by Harvard researcher and literary critic Dave Allworth in his work, Supermarket Sociology, the retail space in American life is one highly attuned to monopolize attention and override individual agency. The postmodern supermarket is a carefully designed system of display in which the customer's attention is always directed towards the packages, where the role of the salesperson is diminished to the degree that its non-human counterpart, the commodity package, has acquired the function of enticing, persuading, and ultimately overpowering the desire of the customer. A similar description of the shared cultural experience makes an appearance in the opening paragraphs of the ACRL framework for access services librarianship. Outside the library world, the importance of the service industry and the emphasis on good customer service was expanding. Expectations had changed, so the library needed to change as well. The library, as merely a collection of resources, was no longer enough. And as Allworth notes the reduced role of the salesperson in the Servicescape, so does the framework when addressing the opportunities for restructuring. This new focus on customer service afforded academic libraries with their new access services departments. Reduced staff costs was one need met, replacing multiple unit heads with one department head. Another was a more cohesive team charged with improving and supporting patron access. And so in this document designed to outline the future of access services in academic libraries, the American retail space is both blamed for the changes in user expectations and copied in an attempt to adapt. Though it is undeniable library users have their service expectations shaped by the American enculturating ritual of shopping, altering library spaces and experiences to meet those expectations means creating a space designed not to encourage critical thinking or intellectual discovery, but rather a highly engineered system of display used to impose institutional values, create wants, and instill customer loyalty, which none of us want. So it seems more likely that the information professionals, ourselves subject to the carefully deployed environmental psychology of the Servicescape, look to the supermarket and the shopping mall and the bookstore, not because cribbing their methods may stave off the library's obsolescence, but rather because of our own sustained exposure to the ideological power of the retail space, a power which then asserts itself onto our understanding of the library. And in adopting those retail methods, specifically in access services, We begin to situate the library in that same specific cultural context inhabited by the American retail store, and invite into the library all the ideological baggage that comes with it. And Access Services becomes an anchor for the neoliberal project in the academic library. The methods described in the literature cover all the typical capitalist market-tested approaches for quantifying work in the humanities, reducing labor costs, and ensuring a return on investment for university administrators. The themes of surveillance and big data collection and analytics and constant performance evaluation make it easier to reduce professionals in Access Services to, as librarian Jonathan Cope puts it, laborers with no special knowledge, no solid understanding of how the information that they use has been created, and only a fleeting understanding of their own library and its place in the larger world of information. And the phrase customer service is one of the easiest ways for these ideologies to enter the library. This is a phrase invented by the service industry, which helps to achieve several very specific things: describe, develop, and deploy sophisticated sales and communication techniques designed to manufacture desire for products within customers, conceal the level of sophistication in the strategies deployed against customers, mischaracterize as unskilled labor the complex critical thinking, problem solving, and emotional intelligence required, and the taxing physical and emotional labor performed by employees, to justify the starvation wages of these workers in these entry-level jobs. The screenshot there was taken from the LinkedIn Learning video, How to Create Rapport in 6 Seconds or Less. Here, we see a technique for making visible the act of listening in order to convince customers you're an actual human being. This video series makes up the bulk of the customer service certificate offered by FSU. It's these contradictions that indicate we are not dealing with well-considered best practices for our profession, but rather industry rhetoric used to maintain a deeply held ideological position. According to Marxist philosopher and political theorist Slavoj Žižek, this is precisely the role of ideology, to reconcile the contradictions between our daily spontaneous relationship with the social world and our perceptions of material reality. The ideology of the Servicescape affords us this reconciliation. In this place, customer service can be understood as easy, unskilled labor suitable for low-paying entry-level jobs, in which employees undergo endless hours of sophisticated training and on-the-job learning and perform complex critical thinking and emotional labor in order to politely help customers express their own innate organic desire to buy things. Additionally, I'd add this tactic of paying customer service staff minimum wage while expecting hours of mandatory training to produce exemplary service has not worked for retail. It's an industry experiencing a well-documented decades-long decline. COVID-19 having recently sealed the fate of many national chains who are barely hanging on. And part of that decline has to do with the grueling work performed by underpaid staff in the oppressive, unwelcoming spaces all their research produced, which coupled with other conveniences made it that much easier for customers to abandon brick and mortar big box stores for online retailers. As the library faces the same threats from digitization and automation of our entire profession, why would we look to a failing industry with a terrible reputation and looming obsolescence for new ideas on how to stay relevant?
So what we need is a counter rhetoric for access services that divorces us from the ideologies of the Servicescape, properly contextualizes the work of informational professionals in these departments, fosters a more equitable exchange between scholars, institutions, and information professionals, and generates standardized training which aligns with the shared values of our profession, all part of a concerted effort to better appreciate access services as an integral element of the intellectual craft of librarianship. To begin building this counter rhetoric, let's consider both the macro and micro approaches available to us. Meaningful access services coursework and MLIS programs that covers the most common services administered by these departments, as well as the complexity of providing customer service in a library setting. Customer service standards and training developed specifically for information professionals in a library setting that makes visible the emotional intelligence required and the emotional labor performed by public services staff, prioritizes equitable exchanges between staff and scholars by affirming the emotional needs of both parties, aligns with the shared values of the profession, and enjoys adoption by the ALA, ACRL, RUSA, and so forth. Stop calling it customer service. Develop language which appropriately accounts for the complexity of this work and divorces it from the antithetical values of the retail service industry. Don't wait for support from the institutions of your profession. Engage staff in a collaborative effort to draft standards which support them in their work and scholars in their pursuit of materials and resources. However, the most immediate and effective way to ensure scholars are having meaningful, empowering experiences in library spaces is to simply advocate for the information professionals at your institution that make those experiences possible. The combined phrases of customer service and student worker create the rhetorical devices needed to expect exemplary customer experiences provided by expertly trained staff working in entry-level jobs, making minimum wage without health insurance or other paid benefits. It's unsustainable, it's unethical, and it's hurting the quality of scholar experiences, the perception of access services, librarianship, and the reputation of libraries across the profession. When we invest in the professionals of access services, we express our values that yes, the service desk is an important part of the library experience. The work done there is complex, and we need dedicated, passionate information professionals to make it work. Recently, the Access Services and Delivery team at FSU took on a department-wide review of all staff job titles, position descriptions, reporting lines, and annual salary. This holistic review of our departmental structure sought to eliminate the language of retail from job titles and job descriptions, realign teams to produce more equitable workflows for staff, and update position descriptions to more accurately account for the daily work of Access Services staff members. We work closely with the Dean of FSU Libraries and FSU's Central HR Department to identify the appropriate job codes according to our newly revised position descriptions. Through this process, we identified 9 full-time positions in our department, which now qualify for position reclassification and salary increases. Not because we added more job duties, but because we more accurately described the complex work of Access Services staff and articulated the complexity clearly to university administrators. Our department also drafted and adopted what we're calling our standards for scholarly support. Our goal is for these standards to come in 2 forms: a set of departmental guiding principles to aid decision-making across all services, and daily operational standards for each of our individual services like course reserves, library express delivery, and the work of our collections access team. The example provided here comes from our draft scholar support desk standards, in which we give direct acknowledgement of the emotional labor staff will perform, dissuade them from ignoring their own emotional well-being in favor of performing positivity, and encourage them to take breaks, leave the desk, and call a supervisor if that emotional labor becomes too taxing. And to help reshape the perceptions of our desk, we integrated the phrase scholar support into the redesign of our new scholar support desk at Stroger Library. It's not a silver bullet, but it's a first step towards integrating our counter rhetoric for access services and scholar support into our workspace to better help us resist the common ideologies of the Servicescape.
Thank you so much, everyone. I don't think we have any questions in the chat right now, but I think we'll wait a couple minutes to see if anyone does have questions.
I did get a couple just sent directly to me.
Okay.
One of them was, what should we call it instead of customer service?
Oh, sure. I think that can be, specific to your department. But here at FSU in our department, ASD, we settled on the phrase scholar support. We feel like that accurately describes the work that we do. You can't do research or scholarship on FSU's campus and access library resources and services without going through our team first. We make that work possible. And I think it's important that we make that connection between the daily work done on our circulation desks and by our collections access crew and our library express delivery team, and the research and scholarship output of the university as a whole. It's a straight line, and I think that it's important that library administrators appreciate that connection.
As someone who, sorry, I have a follow-up because I'm interested too, you know, I'm an access services librarian. At my institution, people would be very intimidated by the word scholar. They don't think of themselves as scholars necessarily. Did you have conversations about that possibility?
Yeah, that's come up a time or two. And, you know, I think in a real sense, I think the same can be said by a lot of staff that work in access services departments. I don't think they think of themselves as information professionals, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to call them that. I think all the undergraduate students that are, you know, working hard to advance their academic careers on campus, they're scholars, and they should be treated as such. And their research and information needs are just as important as everybody else's. And if we get them to think of themselves that way, seems like that would be great for their, you know, that imposter syndrome we all suffer from, and the library anxiety that they're going to experience when they first step foot on campus. So I totally understand that perspective, but I think that's a change that we can make. And I think it's important that our staff think of themselves as assisting scholars and not just, oh, it's undergraduate services, we just check out cameras. No, we're having a direct impact on the research and scholarly output for the university.
Great, thank you so much. The next question is, how has the rest of the library/librarians received this ideological change?
You want me to take this one? I think when we gave this presentation at the Access Services Conference in November, this question came up there too, and I think I have a little more nuanced response to it now. Although I do think there's something to say here about COVID-19. I think the perception of our work greatly changed during the pandemic. You know, we were suddenly essential workers. You know, they gave us PPE, they gave us hazard pay, and we stood up a curbside delivery service. So it's very difficult to tell us one day that, you know, we're essential to the daily operations of FSU, and that we're making this large contribution to getting everything up and running again, and then argue with us about how we want to organize ourselves or contextualize our labor, or, you know, define the services that we offer. So I do think the pandemic had a great impact on how our work is perceived. But I also think that in conversations I've had with, you know, folks who consider themselves capital L librarians, their faculty, I've tried to make the point that what access services is experiencing as a profession, it's not going to stop with us. If university administrators can reduce this complex work to just a series of simple processes and procedures and use that to drive down wages and control labor costs, and it's incredibly effective at one part of the library, what makes you think they're not going to come to your part of the library? So it's in their best interest to express that solidarity with access services staff. You know, we're seeing a trend in these departments across the country where there's fewer and fewer faculty librarian lines that are in access services departments. I don't particularly, you know, care about the status of being faculty. I like that I'm called a librarian. I don't think that my contributions to this department are any greater than anyone else who works in ASD with me, but I know that university administrators do. And when they remove a faculty line from a library department, that is them speaking their values with their pocketbook. And as we see that change in access services departments, it's only a matter of time before they figure out that that will work too with a subject librarian program or with a digital scholarship program. So yeah, it's in their best interest that they work with access services librarians to help us more clearly define that intellectual craft of librarianship.
Great. Switching gears just a little bit, what were some of the changes you made in position descriptions to better capture the work? And this was directed at James directly, if James wants to take it.
No, that's a good question. What we've done is, well, we try to focus on just removing a lot of retail language in general and add in support, scholar, specialist, stuff. We also looked at other academic departments and looked at what they used and the terminology that kind of empowered their staff and kind of copied that a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah, I think Eleanor is a great example of this. At the start, before we started that project, Eleanor's working title was Strozier Service Desk Manager. That sounds like someone who works at Best Buy. And that's not to deride the hard work that's done at Best Buy. But we know that that language is used in retail places intentionally. And Eleanor's new title is Access Services Coordinator, as it speaks more directly to the complexity of her daily job duties.
Yeah.
Great. So it was suggested that having access services be a part of library school, but many access services heads are staff positions and many don't have the MLS. Where would you expect these folks to go to grow their customer, in quotation marks, service skills?
Yeah, that's a doozy. That's a doozy. And, I think that's kind of at the core of what we're getting at with this work, is that there's been a change in how this labor is perceived, that you don't need a formal education to do it, that it doesn't need that kind of care and consideration. We'll just hire people who used to work in retail. They know how to make a schedule and they can manage a staffing budget. And I think that, part of that can be appealing, as it lowers the entry into a career in librarianship. But we also know that to move up in libraries, you're going to need that library science degree, and that a library functions a lot differently than a retail space. And there's different concerns, and there's a different user group, and we have different goals. And so having that foundation in library science, I think, is very important. But I also think that that's why we need to develop well-adopted professional standards, so that if you're in an access services role and you didn't go to library school, there's resources provided by the ALA and ACRL and RUSA that speak directly to the complexity of offering scholar support in a library setting.
Great. And then we have a question. Considering the retail service ideology was developed to help libraries compete with other retail or online entities, how do you think your approach helps the library remain relevant to its scholars?
One of the things that James and Eleanor and I have talked about a lot is how drastically the labor market has changed in response to the pandemic. And although we, as a profession, trying to retrofit these spaces in order to compete and deal with Amazon and ebooks, we currently have job descriptions and organizational charts and daily schedules and a lack of benefits that is seriously unappealing to anyone looking for a job at the moment. If we continue to mischaracterize this work and not give it the proper complexity that it deserves in those job postings, no one's going to apply. Especially because, at least here at FSU Libraries, our access services team do not qualify for the alternative work location remote work program that FSU stood up post-pandemic. It's an incredibly unattractive job posting at the moment. And so if you keep expecting that level of expertise and matching it with those low salaries and not connecting it to any remote work possibility, you're not going to have anyone to run the circ desk. And so I think that's one of the main reasons that the library needs to pivot and rethink this work, because it's just not attractive.
Can you discuss student expectations when it comes to this? It's my impression, this is the questioner, that students view higher education as a purchase and come in with a customer's expectation of all university services. How do you change a student's understanding of what we do and what to expect from service?
I think it goes back to that same question about using that word scholars. And so I think it's just about modeling that interaction for them. Whenever I worked in retail, it was so frustrating to constantly hear the customer is always right, even when they were an incredible jerk to me on the phone, or just not taking no for an answer. And I think if the libraries change that exchange with our scholars, especially faculty members on campus, and we focus on the staff and we prioritize their needs, and we just model that behavior for our incoming undergraduate freshmen, I think that's the first step in order to set the expectations for them. And I know that sounds kind of hard, but post-pandemic, FSU libraries, we had to collaborate on a set of public-facing community standards simply because of the level of abuse a lot of our frontline staff members were experiencing from students and faculty alike. The tensions on campus were high. The political climate in the country at the time was at a fever pitch. And we're one of the few places that's open, that's offering a service to our community members. And it was getting very tense. And so we had to draft these community standards. We had to put them on the website. Our dean did a great job on that initiative, shared it with the other deans at the university. And essentially the library said, we're not going to take it. We're here to help you. We're here to make your research and scholarship easier. But we are human beings with thoughts, feelings, and dignity, and we expect to be treated as such. And so I think that's part of this work too, is staff advocating for themselves and the work that they do.
Great. Is the term scholar support used in the FSU library beyond access services? Do you get pushback for using the term support as being a helping item? I ask as I'm trying to use more partner/collaborator language on campus.
I think James can speak to this one.
Yeah, I haven't gotten any pushback on my title. It's only been a couple of years, but it does make you feel a little more empowered too, and it makes you feel like you fit in a lot of different spaces instead of just one or two. So I do think it's very healthy, and the language is adjusting between different departments now, and it's good. It's also kind of like how we try and you can stress that our student workers are just staff, and that's still a thing that we're pushing. Like, people fall back on calling our student workers, and we're just like, no, they're staff. It's okay. You can call them that. But yeah, language is powerful,
Yeah, we actually stole the phrase from another department. Our social sciences, arts, humanities department. We started a monthly open forum to discuss issues in their profession, and they called it the Scholarly Support Network. And part of it was trying to align subject librarians with functional specialists and access services and collections, access staff, resource sharing staff, so that they could all collaborate on the full workflow of any of those individual services and get communication flowing a little better about pain points faculty were experiencing, et cetera. It's no wonder that the director of this department who set up the Scholarly Support Network used to be an access services librarian and a very talented one. And yeah, he used that phrase for this initiative, and ASD just stole it. I mean, just bald-faced stole it. We thought it was great, and we thought it did what we wanted it to do.
Sorry, I had there was a question up a little bit higher that I was going to grade. Oh yeah. So what changes, if any, let's see where to go. Yeah. Have you made to practices and policies regarding student employees?
Oh man, all three of us want to answer this so bad.
Well, we haven't heard from Eleanor in a minute, so let's hear from her. Okay.
Yeah. We have made so many changes. For starters, as James was just saying, they're referred to as part-time staff only. They wear a staff badge where it just says staff. It doesn't say their name, which honestly protects them from the public. And that's unfortunately important when you work a desk, when you're front facing. We have a handbook that we use in the scholarly support desk standards, which are in a previous slide, that guide all of our training, and it kind of relates to another question that I saw down there, but yes, thank you, Jeff. These six are overarching themes for the whole department. And when we can break that down into say, hey, when this happens to you on the desk and someone yells at you, you don't have to take it. You don't have to just do what they ask you to do. You can say, I'm gonna get a supervisor and step back, and giving our staff those like very clear parameters has been really helpful for changing the culture and the language for them. We've also set up a whole program. Jeff and James really started this with the peer leaders, where we have a peer leader program, and we also have staff perks where they get free printing, and they get to pay to have a library consultation with their subject librarian if they're writing a paper. Go to any library events, try to encourage them to be more involved, and also giving them things that aren't just that are actually helpful for them, because they are students as well as staff. Yes, I'm sure I forgot other things we did, so that's what I have right now.
That's great, Eleanor. Did either of you want to add to that, Jeff or James?
She did a great job covering everything, but it's been a process, just slowly, just kind of building a new approach, really, to be honest. Yeah.
Great.
I also think that our focus on part-time staff for Eleanor, James, and myself, it kind of led to this this work with thinking about the retail service industry. Years ago, I dropped the title of the article in the chat, but we stumbled across this article, the ideology and rhetoric of undergraduate student workers in academic libraries. Eleanor was working as a part-time staff member at the time. James and I were supervisors on the service point. And that article just like wrecked our brains, and it really impacted the way that we view our part-time staff. And the three of us worked on this total reshaping of that exchange in labor between ourselves and our part-time staff members. Cooker's article focuses on how often that phrase student worker is used to, pay them less money, but, say that you're making it up with professional development opportunities, learning objectives, as opposed to giving them health insurance and sick leave and tuition waivers. And we saw a lot of that happening in our department at the time, and trying to reshape that relationship. We still do have part-time staff. We have a large number of them. Currently, we have around 65. And we think it's important to call them part-time staff, so that context is always a part of any conversation we're having with university administrators. We're not hiding that inequity. But also it helped us think about making our professional development stuff more equitable and more fair, and not telling them it's professional development when really it's just more work without more pay.
Great. I've got a question. What about generational biases against undergraduate students / people who are younger. The median age of librarians seems to be much higher than the undergraduate. I agree with these ideas and behaviors to be more accommodating, but could this acceptance be associated with age? What would your response to this be?
I'm not sure I see the connection there. I think that, the supermarket has been around for a long time. The American retail space has been around for a long time. The access services department is pretty new. A lot of our job titles and our organizational structures are, less than 20 years old, in what is literally an ancient profession. I think that's the change, the response that the library has had to the digital age and to the emphasis we've seen on customer service, are shifting as a national economy into a service economy over the last 50 years. I think that's also a major part of it. But that's still the landscape. That's still how our users interact with their daily social world in the US, and getting them to think of themselves as scholars and not consumers, getting our staff to think of themselves as information professionals and not customer service clerks. I think that's the next step. That's where our focus is. I don't know that I answered the question.
To be honest, I think you did just fine.
Sure.
So let's move on to the next question. Are there planned changes to the framework for access services librarians? And if not, are you planning on helping get these changed?
So I feel comfortable saying that the three of us never expected to be here today. This was us just scribbling and doing research and having some ideas. And next thing you know, we've gotten like, oh, this is like 4 or 5 pages of like research. And then we did like a little mini presentation for our library. And then we're like, hey, you know what? Let's swing for the fences. Let's go to the Access Services Conference. And then that happened. And then not too long after that, we were invited to give this talk. I think we would be very, very interested in participating in that process. But at the same time, never anticipated being here in the first place. So
Yeah, it was a very organic process.
I do want to read just a comment. I'm glad you guys are what we will see in the future of libraries. I'm extremely impressed. Thank you. Just want to make sure it's not just me and Tori thinking that, but others were impressed as well. That's the end of the questions that I have. If anybody else has a question, please feel free to put it in chat. And if I missed anything, I apologize. Please feel free to repost. I did try to catch everything. But I wanted to thank you all so very much for attending this presentation. There will be sent out a recording to all registrants. So as you are here, you will get a recording, a copy of the recording after this is over, obviously.
I also wanted to ask the presenters, would you be comfortable sharing your slides with the registrants as well? Okay, wonderful. Then we will also make sure to include some kind of link to the slides as well for everyone. I think we'll wait a couple minutes to see if anyone else has any questions. But I also wanted to thank you all for being here. I attended your presentation at the Access Services Conference in November. I thought it was very thought-provoking and wonderful then, and I think that even more now. I feel like I've learned even more and realized more than I did the first time. So I wanted to thank you for agreeing to give this talk and contributing to a very productive conversation today.
And before everybody goes, we do have a very short 3-question survey, basically asking, what did you like? what can we do in the future? What can we improve? So if you wouldn't mind filling out that survey for us, we will be having additional presentations in the fall from the Access Services Interest Group. So keep your eyes open for those emails. We do ask for future topics for presentations, so please make sure in the survey to fill that out. We'd love to make sure to address the issues that this group thinks are important. So thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, thanks.
Tori, Lorelei, thanks for having us. Like I said, we never anticipated this work and going this far. I mean, it's just exciting for us. I personally want to say thank you because at the Access Services Conference, we were supposed to present in person, and then we had to pivot at the last minute because I got a face rash. And so I presented with my camera off. So I was really looking forward to this redo of that performance. So thank you for affording me that opportunity.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear that, but I'm very glad that we could give you a redo.